I'm right here. I have the tools to regulate my emotions, meaning that when they spike and I start to feel really anxious or really angry in a way that feels maybe a little bit more out of control, I have the tools to be able to say, it's okay. Have self-compassion. It's okay to feel that way. And this is how I can start breathing, coming back to the present moment. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to move through this.
We're the lost words, but I don't feel so lost with you. Fly through the mountain ranges, but I'll never see the danger. That fireballs is swinging, but our hearts are full. I'm not worried when I'm with you.
Hey, you guys, welcome back to Let's Be Real. This episode is free therapy. So I hope you're ready. I want you to picture all of us together, just jumping on my guest's couch, spilling our guts, feeling like we get exactly what we need today, because I think that's how you're going to experience Monica. Monica DeCristina is a therapist. She has a podcast. She's got some apps. She helps people break out of past unproductive patterns to move forward into full and free lives. And she was really helpful to me. I just so appreciated our conversation. So if you want to check out Monica after you hear this show, I want you to know she's got a newsletter that you can sign up for. We've dropped it in the show description, so you can just click right there and join her list. All right, you guys, without further ado, here's Monica. Thanks everyone for being with us on Let's Be Real. You know that we care so much here about your emotional health, about the way that you are experiencing the world. And that's why it is always one of my favorite shows when we have on a therapist, a life coach, someone who's working in that space and is actively like meeting with people, because this is the real stuff of life. And I've got things that I want to bring to Monica today. And I know that you've got things that you're thinking about. So I'm super glad to welcome Monica to the show. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you.
I'm so glad you're in your therapy office. For those of you guys who are joining us on YouTube, you probably already feel calmer because we're in Monica's office.
Yeah.
So just imagine this as a group therapy sesh, and we'll do that together. I want to jump right in. I know you have a couple podcasts. You have your own app for staying grounded. You have a therapy practice. Mm-hmm. I would just love for you to tell us where your passion for your work comes from.
That's such a great question. I mean, it really comes from where so many of our work comes from. It comes from my own story. I spent years struggling without a name for what was happening inside of me. I was struggling with a lot of anxiety, intrusive thoughts. And it wasn't until I saw a therapist and he wasn't worried. He wasn't impressed. He really just told me what was going on. And it was that kind of shame-free zone, and a zone where I could actually find a name for what was happening, not feel like I was losing it, and be received unconditionally, that I thought, if there's anything I can do, that's what I want to do with my life. And so that's really the heart behind my practice, behind my podcast, behind everything that I do.
And how old were you at that time? Like, was this a little bit later that you decided this, or was this pretty early on in your career?
This was early. I mean, I saw the therapist in my early 20s. So that was about 20 years ago that and I've been practicing for about 15 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you've sort of diversified your practice. So you went from, when did you start really putting content out there, thinking about, beyond kind of the individual client? Because I know, my story, that I was also in private practice for about 8 years and then came to that moment where I was like, how do I maximize this thing? So I'm curious for you what that was like.
Yeah. I mean, it's only been a couple years that I started putting stuff out into the world. And for me, it was really a marriage of so much of my creative life, wanting to kind of combine the two. I don't know if you can relate to that.
Yeah.
But I always wanted to be an artist. I found myself being a therapist. It's creative work too.
Yeah.
And so, and it was just a way to kind of get them, therapy is so private, which is why it works. But it was just a way to get the message a little bit further out. One-on-one's important, but a lot of people can't get to therapy, and that's just true.
Well, I've got I want to ask you some, I have specific topics for us. I'm just going to throw out a thing and be like, this thing, let's talk about it. But before we do that, I know a lot of the basis of what you talk about as far as your own spiritual health, emotional health is about staying grounded.
Yeah.
Could you just define for us what that means and what that looks like on an everyday basis for you and for what you're teaching your clients?
That's such a good question. And, I may answer it differently on a different day, but today I would say that staying grounded is being able to stay in my body and being able to stay in the present moment. and when good things are happening and when hard things are happening. So the good things can just be, the day's going normal. The hard things can be as simple as traffic and you're going to be late, or something more complex. And being grounded is, I'm right here. I have the tools to regulate my emotions, meaning that when they spike and I start to feel really anxious or really angry in a way that feels maybe a little bit more out of control, I have the tools to be able to say, it's okay. Have self-compassion. It's okay to feel that way. And this is how I can start breathing, coming back to the present moment. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to move through this. So that is kind of how I would define grounding today.
Yeah, I love that. I think the staying in your body has been something that I definitely will be. I've definitely always been the kind of person who dissociates into the future or, into escaping somewhere else and learning really. And interestingly enough, even though therapy is my background, it was actually prenatal yoga.
Wow.
That was the first time that I really experienced a place where it was safe to be in your body in sort of a strong way and not in a, I've got to beat my body into submission. I've got to be a certain size. I've got to look a certain way. And I look back on, and at the time, of course, as it always is the case, you never really know what's happening, right? But I look back on that and I'm like, oh, that was it. Like that's when I learned what staying grounded feels like and why it's so important to be like, I'm here, I'm now, like, what am I experiencing? But, and this goes right into one of those topics I wanted to bring in. I was just with a client yesterday and we were talking through kind of this complicated, this is what, of course, comes to the therapy office, but it also comes to our work as leaders. And you might be a manager, you might be a mom, you might be in just some role where you're mentoring someone. And what you experience from them is that they're like this ball of overwhelm, just a yarn, like a twisted ball of yarn of overwhelm. And you begin to help them sort out what that is. So I want to talk about that. Like, what is overwhelm? Why does it happen? And how do you help people start to untangle what's actually going on? Because that seems to be like a very important part of the work.
Love that question. I think it's so relevant for so many of us. I think that, when I'm starting with someone who's really overwhelmed, I like to think of it, and I'll even say to them, I'll use words like you just used, untangling or sifting. I like to, I don't know if I'm not much of a baker, so I don't know what I'm saying here, but, if you sift flour and you kind of sift it out.
Do you pan for gold? Right. It's also the same concept.
Exactly. Yes,
whatever works for you guys.
Yeah.
Bread, gold, whatever. Yes.
Yeah. Or, so you sift all of that out and then you start to get down to what is driving the deepest part of the anxiety and the overwhelm. Because you might start with the PTA commitments and the soccer practices or the requests from your project manager. But then when you start to sift through, you might come down to, I never feel like I'm good enough. Right? I never feel like I'm worthy enough. And that's why I'm pushing so hard to do everything right at every moment. And so I think a lot of it is sorting. It's what am I going to keep? What am I going to toss? And the reality is that is best done with a safe person. It really is. And we can do that with journaling with ourselves and in prayer. But when you're able to sit down with a therapist, with a coach, with a friend, and really sort out, you can kind of get down to what is driving the deepest sense of dread and overwhelm. And it may not be what you initially thought it was. You may be fine with the soccer practice or the project, but it may be something else underneath that with that time and space you can really start to identify.
When you get to that place and a person is with you and they're like, yes, you named it. Like that's, I think what's happening, and this really gets into a little bit of a philosophical conversation I want to have with you, because I think the skill of a coach, a great friend, a great listener is able to get to there.
Yeah.
But then that's such a deep-seated, usually belief that comes from somewhere for so long. And so this leads to my philosophical question, which is, do you believe people can change?
Oh, what a great question.
This is the question of my life.
Yes.
This is literally like my life's question. And I love to talk about it. Like, what have you experienced when it comes to, can people truly be transformed?
I really, really believe they can. First of all, I'm in the industry of change, right? And so I believe it works, and I see it all the time. And I believe we're actually
Yeah.
wired to change. I think that the more we learn about the brain and about trauma and our wiring internally, we see that the body really does want to rewire when it's misfiring. And so, but so often we don't have the tools to do that. I absolutely believe people can change, but I do not think that change is as flashy as it's often presented. I think that it is.
Say more, yeah.
I think the insight is flashy. I love insight. It's amazing. It's so fun. Like, oh, the aha moment. But change is really more of a quiet practice. It's that moment when you were going to lose your temper and you take a breath instead. It's these really quiet, subtle shifting moments where we start to become someone different. And I think the more we can embrace the quietness and the smallness of change, I think the less discouraged we are. Because you may to your neighbor not look really different from one Tuesday to the next Tuesday. But internally, you may have known that it's a completely different morning for you. If that makes sense.
Oh, it makes so much sense. And it reminds me of maybe equating change with growth.
Yeah.
And growth is something that we can all understand. You cannot stare at your baby long enough to see them actually grow.
That's true.
You cannot stare at a tree long enough to see it. You will not be able to discern its growth. But year over year, season over season, the growth is there, right? And I think if we had more of a mindset of actually, that's how change operates.
Yes.
It operates at the speed of growth.
Yes.
And the speed of growth is is not discernible even to the eye. I love that idea. And I love what you just said about insight, because that's the thing that I think gets people kind of going.
Yep.
And they're like, oh my gosh, you understand me. You get you naming something I've never heard, or you help me name an emotion I don't have, but I'm like, that's great, but that's not going to get us.
Right.
That's good and important and needed.
Yeah.
But it's almost like tilling the soil. Nothing is planted yet. We're
exactly.
Just that's all we did.
Yes,
and
exactly.
It will all go back to where it was before if there's nothing planted.
Exactly. Yes, that's so well said. And I think that change too is, for people that are watching, people that are not watching won't see my hand going up and down, but then moving to the right. And I think the more we can embrace that, there's moments of this, the insight is a high moment in the change process. The next day when the insight's over and you have to wake up to the same life, it's a low moment. But as long as we're moving towards the right, we're going to go up and down within that, but we're going to keep heading in the, like you said, in the growth direction. And that's just a normal part of change. I think people kind of, they get discouraged and they jump off the process when they go up and down within the process. And just knowing that that's normal. That's just part of it.
Yeah, I love that. So, okay, great. Topic 1.
Okay.
We did it. Overwhelm. Okay, second one still came up. It was connected to overwhelm. And I do think they're connected, which is, it's a little bit of a buzzword. And that's why I love to bring it up, because I'm like, whenever there's a buzzword out there, spiritual, otherwise therapy, let's define it.
Great.
And let's describe it.
Okay.
And how we move toward it. And so the buzzword right now, but I think is so needed, is emotional resilience. And I feel like you've sort of alluded to it already when you talk about, you feel that spike of anger, that spike of anxiety, and you've got tools to deal with that. But I'd love to hear how you define resilience, and maybe even what it's looked like in your own life, Monica. We started at your story in your 20s.
Yeah.
And when you look at your, up and down, but to the right growth, how does emotional resilience play into that?
I mean, I love that. I love that buzzword. I don't know if we Googled it today what the official answer would be, but my answer is that it's a combination of things, of course, because as a therapist, we see things, layered. But one would be the ability to emotionally regulate yourself, like I referred to earlier. And regulate sounds like a really rigid, kind of unfriendly word. But what that basically means is that I know how to calm my body. I know how to get back to what's true about me, about what I believe in a moment that is hard for me. So that's a big part of resilience, is that because, health and resilience is not the absence of pain. It's not the absence of making mistakes. It's not the absence of getting triggered. It's just being able to circle back to a place of grounded truth and quicker the more you practice it. So that would be the one thing. That the next thing I would say, emotional resilience, is not turning on yourself. And this is kind of something I talk about a lot. And what I mean by that is, when we're in pain or we're having a hard time, very often we double that with an interpretation that's shaming, that's not true, that is, really hard on us. And so I think that not turning on yourself is a part of emotional, resilience. And then finally, I think that being able to show yourself self-compassion. Now, speaking of buzzwords, like self-compassion is almost meaningless at this point. I feel like we hear about it all the time, right? It's like, okay, whatever. But self-compassion is when you treat yourself with that gentle kindness, that unconditional love. And, it has been shown to really, speaking of change, that's one of the things that really helps us change. We can define it as grace. We can define it as acceptance, but there's this gentleness and this love that comes with self-compassion that I think is essential as a foundational part of emotional resilience. We can't really be resilient if we're rigid and shame-based. We will more likely snap than be able to bend and move.
Man, isn't it so counterintuitive though?
Yes.
Like, I know there's this part in us that's like, no, like if I just am unconditionally loving, I'm going to go off the rails. Let's take eating.
Yes,
I think that's a
totally.
great example, right?
Yeah.
Especially with women.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, if I just showed myself love and grace for this situation, I'm going to eat 18 donuts for breakfast. There's this crazy making cycle of belief that like, if I'm not in this rigid system, my life is going to go off the rails completely. And I think that's fear talking, but I'd love to hear more about how you've experienced,
totally
acceptance as the method for change.
And I run into that all the time, as you can imagine, in this sofa right behind me. I mean, people all the time are just
everybody raise your hand who needs to get on the sofa for what I just said.
Right. We all do, myself included. We all have moments like that. And so I think that, one of the things that acceptance is it's not resignation. Acceptance is not the same as giving up. It's not the same as not trying. It's not even the same as not shooting for excellence in an area in your life. It's just allowing yourself to still be worthy of love and worthy of dignity right now. And so once we kind of can embrace that, it's a lot less scary. It doesn't mean, oh, I don't want to change my eating habits, or, oh, I don't want to change this. It just means that until then, or even if you don't, you're still lovable right now. And I think that that's a huge relief. And we know that shame, has been shown to be a very poor motivator of change. Even though we all do it to ourselves, it doesn't actually help people change. And so that's one of the things to remember is that in your own attempts to help yourself change, if you're using shame and saying, I'm so bad, I'm so this, I'm so that, it's not actually effective.
Gosh. I'm like, I just don't have anything back to say. I'm like, yes, let's just sit in the truth that no matter how your day's been, no matter how your day will be, you are lovable.
Yes.
Like that just part of it. And, I know you probably do this work too, but I often will try to bring people back to say, when you're telling me this story, how old were you? You're 7, you're 12, you're whatever, you're 10. And like, have you looked at a 10-year-old recently?
Right.
When you're at church or out in the mall, like look at the size of a 10-year-old and then try to give yourself that tone of voice when you're dealing with this thing. There's so much there about the way we would love others, especially innocence and vulnerability, which we all have inside of us. And the way we love innocence and vulnerability, I think can unlock this place of, I don't need to shame myself, hate myself, criticize and condemn myself as my like mode of operating.
Right.
It's not a good look.
Yeah.
It just isn't. And it comes out of you. I mean, I'm sure you say this, like, hey guys, like everyone can read your mail. Like it's not, you're not hiding as much as you think that you are. And that alone can be like, oh, do I want to do I want this voice to be out there in the world? This inner voice that's manifesting itself outward in some way. Do I want that to be out in the world? And those are the things that I think can help us kind of move forward from there. So, okay, my last question, very, very specific around, this is the end of our therapy session. Then I have a couple personal questions, but my last question for you now is about the third thing that I hear a lot. And then I'm going to give you a chance if you've got like a topic that I didn't bring up that you're like, and here's the other theme that I hear all the time. My third one is boundaries. Okay. Boundaries. And big buzzword. So we can talk about defining boundaries. I talk about boundaries as your God-given resources and your stewardship of them, your ability to allocate your God-given resources, finances, time, emotional health, whatever it is, it's yours to give. And some people try to take it. So you've got to like figure that out. So if we went with that definition, I think something I'm hearing a lot right now is my friends, my family don't agree with a decision I'm making, with a thing that I'm doing. When do I engage and when do I let it go? And how do I know how to do that? So big question, but I'm going to throw that to you.
Yes, it's such a big question. So when my family and friends are not agreeing with a decision I'm making, and how does that, the Venn diagram cross over with my boundaries? Yeah. I mean,
and when do I just let it go? And when do I actually engage,
engage with them to explain to them, this is why I'm doing this. This is not why I'm doing this.
Take any topic, the way you handled COVID.
Yes.
The political scene, like vaccines. Like, I mean, race, there's been so many, I mean, I don't know about you, but every person I've spoken with over the last year as I've traveled has had like a pretty significant breach in a relationship. Somewhere in the last 3 years.
Yeah, I see that in my office all the time. I really do. And I think one of the things that comes up with that, with boundaries, is the idea that sameness is not closeness. And I think we've gotten those two things confused. That sameness is not relationship. It's just an overlap. It's just an identification. You identify with the way someone else is operating or the decisions they're making. And so, if sameness is not closeness, then you can be close to someone, or you can be in a relationship with them and they disagree with you. And this is where the boundary comes in. They have a choice also. They have a choice. Do they want to stay in relationship with you if they disagree with you? But you can hold on to who you are and what you believe is true and right, and do that in a really loving way without caving into something that doesn't feel real or true for you. And so, that would be what I would say. And boundaries was actually the buzzword that I was going to suggest. So we're on the same track here.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. All right. What else do you want to say about it? I gave you my definition. I'd love to hear yours. And maybe, if you could give one, you've got your one passing thought before a person leaves the office, and you're like, if I could give you one thing about this is what it would be.
About boundaries? What? Okay. Yeah. I think it would be that, and I didn't come up with this phrase. I don't know who did, but that boundaries are for you, not for other people. And I think that so often that's where we get so confused, because we think, well, they're upset and they're this and they're that. And that's not the point of boundaries. The boundaries is where you end and other people begin. Right? It's what you're responsible for, brushing your teeth, paying your bills, to much bigger things. And so I would say that, remembering when it gets rocky, because it really can get. Boundaries is really fun to read about and write about on Instagram, but in real life, it gets really, really messy. To remember you're not doing it for other people, and that you're not necessarily at all unloving if someone's disappointed in your boundaries. And so holding on to, why am I doing this boundary? Well, because this is what I believe, this is what I need to do. And if someone else is disappointed, that's also within their boundaries. They're allowed to feel that way, but that doesn't need to reflect on the validity of my choices and my boundaries.
I find the place for me that I have to talk myself through this more than any other is actually parenting. Yes. Remembering that one of my teenagers' disappointments or disapproval or whatever, that is in their purview. That is their boundary to be in. Yeah. And I'm not responsible for that. I'm not responsible for, I can shepherd emotions. I can come alongside. Sure. I can be empathetic, but I'm not actually responsible for the way that you feel.
Yes.
I can help you learn to be resilient. But that is one of those places for some reason, even with all the training, when it comes to your own kids, you're like, I need, I need a little coach. I need a coach in my corner to remember that.
Totally.
But yeah, that's such a great word, Monica. I love that. So I want to ask you, what are some of your practices, rhythms that you have in place to maintain your own personal emotional health with the work that you do? You're pouring out all day. You know, I know there's a spiritual reality to bearing other people's burdens, especially the really hard, traumatic things that we will hear. So I'm curious what that looks like for you in this season.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I really, really go back to stillness and quiet. That's my number one thing. Because I'm also a mom of 3 kids. And so, you know, that is never quiet, which is, you know, wonderful, but also a lot of noise and a lot of feelings. And so I get up at really early in the morning and I'm still and I'm quiet. I read, I pray, I meditate. My dog is there. Like I need that to restart. I'm an introvert, you know, and so that you know, who works with people. So that is one of my main things. My other thing is going for walks and listening to books on tape. And I love, you know, books that I feel poured into about, you know, right now I'm listening to a book on parenting, or I love listening to books on boundaries, or these things that, you know, might sound like, oh, is that a workbook? But really for me, it's just a chance to reflect, and something about the movement and putting the vitamins of good wisdom into my ears just really restores me. So those are my 2 like really go-to regular rhythms.
I love it. Oh my gosh, so good. And that might lead us in, it might be a book, but kind of the question that I ask everyone as we're getting close to the end. And by the way, Monica, this has been so good. I just feel like there's been all these little minutes of just truth, but also your compassion, your clear love for people, and your desire to meet people where they are. You're helping me believe, yes, we really can change. And it may not look exactly the way we think, but we're never done. And that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to be an unfinished work, because that means there's always adventure ahead. So thank you for that. We're going to link everything about you in all the places that you can find them in the show notes, so you guys can find Monica and follow her and learn from her wisdom. But our last question on our way out here is a little lighter, and it might be one of those books on tape, but I want to know what is just keeping you real right now. It's just like a little thing that brings you an inordinate amount of joy. It can be a product, it can be a person, it can be an app, whatever. I'm just curious if there's something like that in your world.
Yeah, I mean, in it's not deep. So
no, I was going to say, because your earrings are bringing me life right now, and like that would be perfectly fine.
Well, I love earrings. I've known that's like the gift I give, and the gift I love to receive. I love earrings, so that is real. I would say that, you know, the Great British Baking Show is something that I find.
My gosh, same.
Right? I mean, and because I deal in so much. I'm naturally an overly serious person. Okay, I own that.
Okay.
And I deal in very serious things, and so just to watch things where the consequences maybe like the cake is flat, you know, it's really really a relief. So that I would say is something that I really really enjoy.
And there's something about the vibe of the show that's like, it's light without being snarky, without being kind of base, and which is sort of like, to me, like the American version of entertainment is always like that. Yeah. And it lacks any of that. So it's just got, just a real, I can't think. The word is not innocence. What's the word?
It's like kind. I think it's kind. It's funny.
Kind. But it
stays like it stays kind, and it's there's always lots of grass shots and, you know, outdoors, and it's just soothing.
There's a lot of landscape.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I'm always like, where are they?
Truly, and there's cake. Yeah, I mean, it's just cake and tea and beautiful landscape and kindness. Yeah. That's what brings us life. Well, I agree, and I love that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And thank you so much for being on Let's Be Real. It has been awesome.
Thank you. I've had so much fun.
Flying through the mountain ranges, but I never see the danger. That final boss is swinging.